We have gone final in Santa Clara, where the Niners have improved to 1-1 on the season after a loss to the Bears in Week 1. They bounced back against a divisional foe at home, but it did not come without its own loss. Trey Lance in the first quarter suffered what appeared to be a gruesome injury to his ankle. Early reports are that Lance will have to undergo surgery, and it will likely be season-ending. It had all the signs of season-ending with an air cast, a cart, and some heartfelt goodbyes from teammates, but pays to have the best backup in the league, and it does pay because he cost you some money. Jimmy Garoppolo leading his team to victory here 27-7 as the Niners are now even 500. And with that, we welcome you into Postgame on HQ, presented by SoFi. Break up with bad banking. Download the SoFi app, and I am joined by two-time Super Bowl champ Bryant McFadden and CBS NFL analyst Ryan Wilson. I'm your host, Joe Musso. As we begin there in Santa Clara, guys, we'll get to the ins and outs of the game, but we do have to address the Trey Lance injury here early on. First quarter, it did not look good. B-Mac, I'll go your way first here because it's an odd situation with Garoppolo as the backup, waiting in the wings for perhaps something like this to happen. The keys to the car are his again. Big picture, small picture, take me through the injury here to Lance.
Well, unfortunate injury for a young player who was looking to establish himself in the organization as the franchise quarterback. I mean, when you watch the play, I had to look at it like 2 or 3 times to see exactly what happened because it was a routine tackle, but of course he got folded up a little bit in a difficult position that led to that injury. Anytime you see an air cast, you know it's not a good thing. So that's the nature of the game sometimes, you know, the unfortunate bounce in regards to injuries. But that's also, as you mentioned, why you want to make sure you're secured at the backup spot behind your starting quarterback. And think about this, guys. We know how motivated the 49ers were in the offseason in trying to move Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Granted, things didn't happen because of his shoulder injury that he sustained as far as with the surgery. But now looking at that was a blessing in disguise. Because if this was to happen and you don't have Jimmy Garoppolo, who knows exactly which direction your season would go. But when he jumped into the saddle, he looked extremely comfortable. The offense was moving. He had 2 total touchdowns, so he played exceptionally well considering the circumstances.
My first question was, why is Trey Lance running the ball up the middle 2:20 into the football game? And look, I understand if you want to run an RPO and he happens to get the ball outside. I don't know if you want to run it between the tackles. Your franchise quarterback, the player you drafted after trading to number 3, you took him 3rd overall and giving up a boatload in the way of compensation. That was puzzling to me. Kyle Shanahan, we can probably all agree, is one of the 2 or 3 best play callers in all the NFL. They've already lost Elijah Mitchell because of a knee injury, but you have a stable of people who can run the ball, including Deebo Samuel, who really doesn't have a position. That was curious to me. And I feel like they're trying too hard to have Trey Lance have early success. And unfortunately, it backfired for Trey Lance, who was clearly very upset as he left the field in that cart, as you mentioned, Joe. But as BMAC notes, it's good to have someone like Jimmy G on the sidelines. The talking points the last week and a half, 2 weeks was, how long is it going to take for Jimmy G to unseat Trey Lance? And Kyle Shanahan seemed to say this is Trey Lance's team. Injuries have obviously changed that conversation, and now they're right back in the mix. I'm not a huge Jimmy G guy in terms of leading your team to the Super Bowl, but guess what he's done? He's led that team to the Super Bowl, and he was one Jaquiski Tartt dropped interception away from going back to the Super Bowl last season. So he's a great guy to have come off the bench. They won't miss a beat. And, oh, by the way, they're going to get George Kittle back eventually, too, which only makes that offense more explosive.
Not that 1 + 1 = 3 here, but Garoppolo did seem to incite some intensity in his team as they kind of came together around Garoppolo, maybe coming together around that moment. But it's also an interesting situation here, Ryan. Does this in an odd way open the window back up for the 49ers this season? It looked to be a developmental year, at least at the quarterback position, but are they back in the hunt, oddly, because of this omission?
Well, I don't think Kyle Shanahan would have told you it was a developmental year. I think they had every inclination as well of succeeding with Trey Lance. The offense obviously was going to look much different because of that athleticism. But you could make the argument, as you sort of allude to, Joe, that maybe they're in better shape now than they were yesterday in terms of the evolution of this offense. Perhaps it's unfair to Trey Lance, but he didn't look good in week 1. Yes, it was a slosh bowl in Chicago, but everybody played in the same conditions. Justin Fields made a few more plays at the end there. So we got to see nothing from Trey Lance today because he went out so early in the football game, and it is unfortunate because you want that young quarterback that costs you so much to go get to have those developmental years early in his career. It didn't pan out. But again, this is a great plan B. And to answer your question, taking the long route there, yeah, they're right back in the mix. The NFC isn't nearly as stout as the AFC. I thought they were in the mix before the season started if Trey Lance could just steady as she goes it. It didn't work out last week. It doesn't matter now because it appears he's probably done for the season. And you have Jimmy Garoppolo basically picking right back up where he left off. The only difference is he took a pay cut to stay there.
Well, Ryan, it sounds like you believe Jimmy Garoppolo gives the 49ers a better chance in winning. Because if you said that they're in a better situation than they were yesterday, that's kind of what I get from that. And I want to ask that question before I make an assumption. Do you believe they're better off with Jimmy Garoppolo than Trey Lance?
No, and like I said, I'm not a huge Jimmy G guy. I don't want to call it your guy Kirk Cousins because I know you got some relatives on that team, but they're basically the same person. But they do find ways to win in the end. I wanted to see Trey Lance succeed for sure. Last week doesn't really matter, and now he won't get that chance. On paper, based on history, I think Jimmy G gave him a better chance, but I was willing to see what Trey Lance had to do. Unfortunately, we won't get a chance to see that. So, it doesn't matter what I think because I got to roll with Jimmy G either way.
Yeah, a known asset in some ways does mitigate some of the risk that comes with trying to onboard a new quarterback, and a dual threat one at that in Trey Lance. We're hoping for a speedy recovery there. It was the intention, guys, to trade Jimmy Garoppolo in the offseason. That doesn't come to fruition, and perhaps that is what keeps them relevant in the NFC. Short term, Jimmy's up. It's time to go. That will likely be the story for the remainder of the season. But long term, let's have the conversation here, B-Mac. What does this mean for the 49ers if Jimmy goes out there and we're talking about a 49ers team again playing deep into the postseason and proving himself?
Man, if that happens, they got a tough situation on their hand because next year will be the third year for Trey Lance. And because of this injury that just happened today, you don't know exactly who he is as a quarterback. And Ryan talked about it. You might not be a personal fan of Jimmy Garoppolo, but one thing we all would agree to, he win ball games. They find a way to win when he is the starting quarterback. And that has been the consistent theme since he's been there in San Francisco. And when he has not been in the lineup, they struggle to win. So if that happens, if that hypothetical became a reality, they find a way to get into the postseason and make a deep postseason run. What happens at the quarterback position moving forward, knowing that Trey Lance won't take another snap this year? Do you hand him the keys back all over again, or do you make this some type of quarterback competition? Because remember, they revamped Jimmy Garoppolo's contract. So he's on a one-year deal. So even if you have to make that decision, you got to re-him up. So I don't know. I know right now they're all about trying to win ball games. But if they do win a lot of ball games, make a deep postseason run, they got some big-time decisions they got to answer and make on at the quarterback position.
We got questions, too. Bryant, McFadden, and our guy Ryan Wilson here to give us all the answers throughout the hour. Thank you, gentlemen.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.